Welcome to Midnight Casebook, where every shadow hides a secret and every mystery begs to be solved. Tonight, we unravel the chilling tale of Father Brown and the umbrella left in the confessional, a fan-made story paying homage to the brilliance of G.K. Chesterton's legendary detective. We'd love to have you along for this enigmatic journey. Drop a comment to let us know where you're watching from, share your theories, and if you spot any inconsistencies, don't hesitate to call them out. Your keen eyes and sharp minds help us craft even more captivating mysteries in the future. Chapter 1. The Umbrella in the Confessional. A loud crash of thunder reverberated through the ancient rafters of St. Jude's Church, a rumble that seemed to signify misfortune rather than mere weather. Father Brown, kneeling in solitary prayer, with rainwater streaming down the stained glass windows like fallen tears, jolted at the noise. Thoughts of a rogue storm momentarily eclipsed by a far graver unease. His heart quickened, not out of fear for the approaching tempest, but by an intuitive sense that the hour's sanctity had been shattered. Amid the swirling shadows cast by flickering candles, a sudden disquieting scream wafted through the air, a distress call that felt unnervingly close, yet shrouded in the thick, oppressive atmosphere of the church. Pulling back the veil of his thoughts, Father Brown glanced toward the confessional, half embedded in darkness. A glint caught his eye. A forgotten umbrella, its handle ornately carved but ominously askew, was propped like a metallic omen against the wall. He shifted, curiosity piqued. Who would leave such a distinct piece behind in this sanctuary? As he reached for it, a chill raced down his spine, and a soiled letter slipped from beneath the umbrella's fabric onto the cold stone floor at his feet. He squinted, trying to decipher the scrawled words that stung with an air of desperation. "Forgive me, I cannot go on like this," read the faint ink, but before he could delve into its meaning, the outcry of the village pierced the air. A voice, now mingled with alarms, that echoed through the graveyard of lives about to unravel. Minutes later, he stood in the squire's estate, all grandeur and dust, a semblance of nobility fallen into decline. The house, a relic of better days, loomed under the pall of clouds that hung heavy over Kembleworth. It was there that he found Sir Reginald Halfmoon sprawled across his richly adorned study, an expression of horror etched upon his face, his once vibrant tweed jacket stained with what seemed to be the residue of his final agony. The door locked from the inside told Father Brown that this was no mere accident of fate. A death such as this, in a house where the echoes of laughter once mingled with music and prosperity, carried the bitter scent of betrayal and grief, made all the more ghastly by the absence of an exit. "It simply cannot be," exclaimed Mrs. Halfmoon, her voice trembling as she wrung her hands in despair. The way she leaned against the doorframe seemed not of grief, but of defiance, a barricade between herself and the grim reality before them. "Reginald would never take his own life. I told him not to involve himself in that foul business with the church." Father Brown's eyes narrowed at her words. "Business with the church?" he asked gently, searching for the edges of hidden motives twisting in this distinctly chaotic scene. Mrs. Halfmoon's eyes darted toward the window, fear flickering momentarily in their depths before she distilled her breath and replied, "The new taxes, Father. The tithe. He was stricken by them. The scribe's errors. He feared the community." "Thus he had much to lose," Father Brown murmured, suddenly aware of a tempest of emotions driven by envy and deception, no less present than the one swirling outside. He stepped toward the desk, where a matching set of pens lay poised over parchment, highlighting the disparity between the intentions behind ink and the blood that spilled unto them. With deliberate slowness, he scanned the letterhead, a local firm, Plaistow and Mills. As the name softly rolled in his mind, it struck him, an innocuous clue left behind in a house filled with shadows. Did he mention anyone specific in his moments of distress, perhaps related to that letter? The widow raised her brows defiantly, weaving words of anger mingled with betrayal. How could you ask such a thing? He had too many enemies, but they were not at the hand of the church. They were the petty resentments of a small village refusing to let go of their archaic ways. As the conversation swelled and ebbed, Colonel Witherington, a stout presence in his crisp uniform, stepped forward, the epitome of control against the chaos of the moment. "It doesn't matter who shot him," he bellowed, disdainful. "This is obvious. A hopeless coward, finishing what he started with too much wine and too little nerve." "Cowardice, Colonel. We speak without knowing the truth of a man's heart," Father Brown interjected softly. The question lingered like incense in the air. "You say that, yet you have little claim to his motive, do you not?" The colonel paled, his expression faltering as he met Father Brown's cool gaze. Silence wrapped around them like a cloak. The moment felt taut and alive, as if they stood on the precipice of truth or oblivion. Suddenly, the stillness shattered as a thundering crack of lightning rent the air, illuminating the room in a vivid flash. Just then, a twist of fate. A arrangement of books upon a lower shelf trembled, and one tome slipped, falling open with an ominous thud, revealing a carefully folded piece of paper nestled within its pages. "And what is this?" Father Brown murmured, realizing the implications of the timing. With a swift motion, he retrieved it, hands trembling as he opened the note, the ink barely dry, brimming with damning revelations. Outside, a distant wail rose with the clouded winds, but all traces of sound seemed to be eclipsed as he read the words that threatened to unveil a night more crooked than they knew. "Father, wait!" Mrs. Half-Moon shrieked, reaching for him. But Father Brown, his mind racing with revelation, heard the creak of footsteps behind him. The door swung open with a rush, and a figure silhouetted in the storm's chaos dashed past unseen. "Stop!" he bellowed, but obsidian fingers of the tempest closed around him as darkness swallowed. Yet another truth. The room spun with secrets and intention. The invitation to the concealed truth, now poised on a jagged edge. Chapter 2. A prayer that went unanswered. Who dares claim to have seen the murder? The voice rang out through the damp air of the church, a sharp jab amidst the mournful tolling of the bell, reverberating with urgency and defiance. The gathering of villagers, clad in dark clothing and heavy hearts, abruptly stilled, their somber faces painted with a blend of confusion and intrigue. The pall of grief that enveloped the small congregation at Sir Reginald Half-Moon's funeral was pierced, much like the sharp crackle of lightning that danced menacingly outside, casting ghastly shadows upon the candlelit faces. Father Brown, seated amongst the quietly grieving, felt the weight of suspicion shift toward an unremarkable figure emerging from the back row. There stood Oliver Gleeson, a wiry man with a shock of untamed hair, his brow damp with perspiration, eyes wide as saucers that flickered with equal parts terror and bravado. It was as if he had been propelled from the shadows, an apparition summoned to the altar of chaos. I saw it with my own eyes. The killer, the one who shot him, right there through the window, he added, raising a trembling finger toward the darkened glass, as if the very essence of guilt hovered at its threshold. A chorus of whispers erupted, the air thick with skepticism and dread. "What was he doing out there in the storm?" murmured one villager, while another shot a skeptical glance, rooted deeply in disbelief. Father Brown observed the scene with a calculating gaze, his heart steady even amidst the turmoil. Oliver's voice trembled, the cadence of truth and falsehood entwining like vine against a crumbling wall, wearing the guise of a truth-teller, yet showing the markings of a man desperate to reclaim respect, or perhaps earn vengeance. "Speak plain, Oliver," Father Brown urged, his voice a soothing balm amidst frayed nerves. The flickering candlelight danced in the hollow of Oliver's eyes, revealing a shifting shadow in his resolve. "What did you see? If you have something of import, now is the time to share." His mouth opened, but the words fell out, disjointed and stammering. I was at my window when it happened. The shot rang out. It was like thunder, only louder. I saw a figure, cloaked, swift, darting away. There was a wild look about him, a mixture of terror and a touch of inspiration that left many in the pews doubtful. "Was this figure known to you?" Father Brown pressed, unwavering. "What did they look like? A shadow cannot provide justice." The village remained still, collective breaths held, pinned to the immediacy of his inquiry. "Not known, I swear. Only a flash of a hat. I welcomed the rain, and he was just gone." Oliver's hands clutched the edge of the pew with white-knuckled intensity, the tremors in his voice betraying the assurance of his claim. The air turned heavy, a palpable tension that clung to them like fog on a winter's morn. Father Brown could almost feel the threads of doubt tighten around Oliver's shoulders, weaving a fabric of suspicion between him and those who had gathered, some prepared to believe, others eager to disdain. Needing to establish a clearer perspective, he exchanged brief but pointed glances with Mrs. Halfmoon, whose disquiet rippled beneath her carefully composed exterior. She trembled ever so slightly, a manifestation of a hidden battle between sorrow and the rising tide of social anxiety that accompanied the unveiling of such accusations. "Did anyone else see anything?" Father Brown's calm question sliced through the mounting fervor, yet silence enveloped the room. Discomfort shifted in the air like the storm outside, rain beating against the stone walls in waves. The squire's death had only begun to unravel the tightly woven fabric of this community, as spirits long buried seemed to stir within the shadows of grieving hearts. With careful discernment, Father Brown sought for a lead, a thread that might unravel the broader tapestry of obscured truths. "Oliver," he ventured, "do you recall the time of the shot? Was it before or after you had seen the figure?" It was an innocuous question, yet one that would elicit unspoken fears about time, alibis, and proximity. "Before, I think. During," he stammered, confusion lacing his panic. Father Brown's eyes narrowed, noting freshly blossoming details that sagged under the weight of a heavy burden. Oliver's insistence, his urgency to speak, the peculiar way his breath quickened at the inquiry of time. Father Brown's mind turned over the implications like pages turned in a book, and then an unexpected thought struck him. The earlier reading of the note, taken from Sir Reginald's library, surfaced unbidden. "A scribe's errors," Mrs. Halfmoon had once lamented. and the notion of something concealed began to coil tighter around his intuition. This taxation matter you spoke of earlier, what did it entail, and how closely would Sir Reginald have been involved with the clergy or the villagers? Mrs. Halfmoon hesitated, her composure wavering as she instinctively glanced toward the small assemblage gathered, a mix of friends, acquaintances, and potential foes. It was complicated. There had been murmurs of a vast inheritance, but the church's need for funding. Her next words faltered as the horror of implication clouded her realization. Reginald feared they might act against him if they believed he hid wealth. People are sometimes more ruthless over money than over matters of the heart. A ripple of recognition dawned across several faces, their talk of the dead weighed down now by expectations of the living, whispers of avarice awoken in a darkness now exposed. It was enough, Father Brown knew, to send ripples of mistrust cascading amongst friends, and thereby unraveling the very foundations of their grief. "Father," Oliver appealed with sudden intensity, the tremor in his voice now laced with desperation, "it was not I who killed him. I thought, but the echo of a thunderous clap rang across the sky, and outside the church, lightning struck a nearby tree. The power in the building flickered as if momentarily sucked into that violent moment of nature. With that, a door burst open, flinging against the wall, and a figure clothed in darkness stumbled into view, drenched and wild-eyed. "It's all a trap," they gasped, breathless but fierce, "to claim the inheritance. He shall rise from the grave, and we shall all face his wrath." And just as, abruptly as they had entered, the room eclipsed into chaos of frantic gasps and disbelief. Father Brown stood rooted, the echoes of actual and apprehended fears swirling as the air thickened with unsaid confessions and unguarded truths. What sinister plot had been forged within the parish's sacred bonds, masked beneath the surface of mortality? Steeling his resolve, Father Brown leaned closer to Oliver, whispering, "Tell me precisely what you witnessed, and know that the truth, it is not shackled by fear." Yet even as he spoke, a foreboding sense of dread washed over him, the fabric of innocence fraying toward an unraveling that reached into the very heart of Kembleworth, threatened by a spectre hovering between betrayal, greed, and the prayers that had withered unanswered in shadows unseen. Chapter 3. The Intruder Who Never Was. The thunderous crack of splintering wood echoed through the air, piercing the chaos that had enveloped the village. Father Brown's heart leapt as the great oak door of Sir Reginald Halfmoon's study swung open with a violent force, its hinges protesting like a ghostly wail amid the storm's fury. Rain lashed the stone walls, a violent orchestra accompanying the tempest outside, heralding an unspeakable fear that had settled over Kembleworth since the squire's death. With the smell of wet earth and dark secrets mingling in the musty air, Father Brown's senses heightened as he stepped into the dim light of the study. Bookshelves, burdened by volumes dense with lost knowledge, lined the walls like sentinels, their shadows dancing around the flickering candlelight, a feeble attempt to ward off the encroaching darkness. An uneasy silence accompanied Father Brown as he crossed the threshold, instinctively connecting the frantic energy of the storm to the turmoil within. The study had been locked since Sir Reginald's demise, the lock turned as firmly as the hearts of those who mourned him. Yet here it lay, thrown open, a gaping maw into the unknown. His eyes swept the scene, scanning for anomalies amidst the familiar detritus of a well-lived life. At once, he noticed the overturned chair, its posture as disheveled as the villagers' grief. Papers fluttered carelessly across the floor, strewn like fallen leaves, yet upon closer inspection, the soil-stained letters bore no signs of a struggle, nor the scent of danger. "What has transpired here?" he murmured to himself, the query lingering, just beneath the pulse of impending damning revelation. A sudden chill coursed through him as he approached the desk, its polished surface marred by a few errant drops of ink, shapes etched with a lucidity that felt almost ghost-like in their clarity. He remembered how the note had practically begged to be examined, its secrets dripping like rainwater into the soil of deceit. Were they merely fallen leaves in the storm, or was there a deeper root? "Look more closely," he urged as he reached for the documents, reverently brushing away the remnants of the squire's final thoughts. As he sifted through the clutter, one peculiar letter caught his eye. Its inscription, written in a hurried scrawl, was partially obscured by dampness, the ink running to smudged obscurity. The signature, though barely legible, resonated like a distant bell in his mind. Could it be? "Father Brown," came a shaky voice from behind him, surging like a rising tide of worry. It was Mrs. Halfmoon, her porcelain face now pale as she stood trembling in the doorway, rain-sodden and uncertain, as if the very storm had come to claim her spirit. "Have you uncovered anything?" "Merely intimations, I fear. But this room speaks volumes to those who listen," he replied gravely, holding the letter aloft. "What do you know of this?" Her gaze fell upon the letter, her lips pressing together as if swallowing some bitter truth. "That is, but surely it cannot pertain." "Why not?" His voice remained steady, though the stolen moment held a weight only the rain could wash away. Here was an ally, a woman wrapped in the fabric of loss, yet willing to confront that which lay tangled in human frailty. The villagers say much when sorrow shadows their judgments. I am not so sure," she responded, stepping further into the room as if the shadows themselves were whispering secrets. "Some say that Sir Reginald had trepidations, that he feared for his life, but I do not believe his fears were unfounded." "Indeed?" Father Brown pressed, the dynamics shifting like the wind beyond the window. "You hint at something larger, and yet the storms whisper of caution. Yours is an interesting observation." And just as he began to unravel the veil of her words, Oliver Gleeson burst into the room, breathless, his hair darkened by the rain, eyes wide with a mad glint. "It wasn't just me, Father. There was a figure, a shadow. I've heard whispers of it lurking about the cemetery." Father Brown's brow furrowed. Suddenly, Oliver's frantic energy became a misfit piece in a puzzle already awash with confusion. "You've seen this figure firsthand?" he questioned, heart pounding, keys of suspicion rattling in their lock. "What manner of figure?" It moved as fast as thought, cloaked in darkness, hopping graves like a wraith." He paused, panic coating his tone. "It," called out, though I could not make sense of the words. "It was laden with despair. I thought there was something amiss at the funeral." Father Brown's mind whirled, roiling with disquiet as he held on to Oliver's words. "The village has felt fractured since the dead were buried," he murmured thoughtfully, as if turning each syllable in his mind. "A sorrow, forged in gold, might tempt even a most faithful heart. Yet tell me, Oliver, were you the only one to see what you claim?" Oliver hesitated, throat constricting with the press of unspilled words, and while he had spoken of others, Hearing the scream of the invisible figure, doubt flickered across his face. There were murmurs, but no one has stepped forward. They fear. Fear can cloak reality just as shadows obscure the sun, Father Brown reflected quietly, his gaze slipping past Oliver's frayed edges into deeper questions lodged in the souls of the villagers. He knew well that grief could twist transparency into something opaque, turning allies into foes with just a touch of suspicion. What do you perceive holds them captive? In the charged silence, gusts of wind rattled the window panes, a disarray of rage befitting the storm, as Mrs. Halfmoon's finger traced the contours of the letters left behind, revealing trails of distress etched into the parchment. If Reginald should rise, perhaps that spectre you saw is not just a shadow, she murmured, her tone weighty with dread. Perhaps it is the very inheritance they covet. But before Father Brown could respond, the candle sputtered, a heartbeat of shadow dancing on the wall, momentarily obscuring the truth. Lightning struck once more, illuminating the room, a shattering light producing grotesque shapes within the folds of the shadows. The flickering flame cast a long shadow over his heart, and in that instant, realization gripped him fiercely. A memory surfaced, a piece of the dark puzzle finally pinching at the corners of his mind. Mrs. Halfmoon, he breathed, realization dawning like the distant roll of thunder. Did you know of any intimate connections between Sir Reginald and any of the villagers? Something at odds that could have set this storm into action? Before she could respond, another shriek, this one a cry that slashed through the tempest like glass, split the atmosphere from outside the window, urgent and desperate. Father Brown rushed to peer into the swirling midnight, desperately seeking the source, heart racing against the mounting tension that saturated the air like an omen. He could scarcely take in the gaping darkness beyond as he saw a figure, a fleeting silhouette, detached from reality, veering towards the cemetery. "Oliver!" he bellowed as he turned, urgency threading through his voice. "Follow me!" Together, they sprinted from the room, the echo of their hurried footfalls swallowed by the wild storm outside. As Father Brown flung the door open, heart pounding against the shadows, he caught a glimpse of the figure darting among tombstones, the wet ground a canvas for confusion and despair, dragging them down the path to unknown truths. But as they charged through the illuminated darkness, the churning of thunder above matched the tempest in their own hearts, and the intruder who never was loomed closer, threatening to reveal far more than any mere shadow would dare to share. Chapter 4. The Will That Should Not Exist. A scream shattered the storm-soaked night, slicing through the veil of chaos like a knife through mist. Father Brown, his heart racing, skidded to a halt on the gravelled path leading to the churchyard, the air thick with the tang of impending rain and dread. Lightning flickered above, exposing the ghostly form of Mrs. Halfmoon, her hands clasped together in a frightened embrace, standing at the edge of the cemetery where shadows clawed at the ground, like restless spirits seeking release. "It's gone. The will. He has hidden it," she cried, her voice trembling as she clutched the parchment she had just unearthed from the mud, its edges stained and bloodied, like the whispers of regret that clung to them. "Calm yourself, madam," Father Brown urged, his voice firm yet gentle, cutting through the clamor of thunder. The air buzzed with tension, each drop of rain a reminder of the secrets buried beneath the earth. "What do you mean by hidden? Speak plainly." She hesitated, her gaze darting to the shadows that churned beneath the tombstones. I heard them. They spoke of a forgotten will, one that could change everything, she explained, breathless. Reginald was hiding it, afraid it would cause another fracture in the family, something about a legacy he wished to leave behind. Would this will involve the inheritance? Father Brown's thoughts raced, examining the possibilities unfolding, like the tendrils of smoke spiraling from the flickering lamp outside the church. Could it hold the truth behind the chaos and conflict emerging from his death? She nodded fervently, her voice dropping to a whisper. They say it could implicate old wrongs, those long buried and better left undisturbed. There is talk of betrayal within our very bloodlines, Father. As she spoke, the storm surged around them, wind howling like the banshees of old, sending chills crawling down Father Brown's spine. He had always understood that the ties of family could turn monstrous, darkened by envy and greed. But this was another layer, a malignant growth of resentment bound by unseen hands. The urgency of the moment hung in the air, thick and suffocating. We must find this will. If it exists, it could reveal not only Sir Reginald's intentions, but also the darkest seeds growing amidst this village, he said, his eyes narrowing as he considered their next steps. Was there anyone you suspect? Anyone who might wish to keep this hidden? Oliver. The name escaped Mrs. Halfmoon's lips like a plea, her brows knotting in concern. He can charm the truth from anyone, but I fear he has motives of his own. Even his loyalty could be compromised by— Before she could finish, an ominous rustling echoed from the cemetery, the sound nearly swallowed by the heavy rain. Father Brown and Mrs. Halfmoon turned as one, the tension knotting tighter in their chests. For a heartbeat, they both stood frozen, the undercurrent of primal fear thrumming through them. "Did you hear that?" he asked, though the answer lay in the shifting shadows. "Something is moving among the graves," she gasped, her breath hitching. As the shadows shifted into form, a figure darted between gravestones, cloaked in the dark fabric of night and panic. Father Brown! It was Oliver, his face chalky and wild, his eyes wide with terror as they locked onto the duo. I think I know where the will is. There's a hidden compartment in the study." Father Brown's heart leapt. This was a crucial thread in a tapestry suffused with uncertainty. "Then what are we waiting for? We must go." He grabbed Mrs. Halfmoon's arm, his resolve solidified by the purpose coursing through him like adrenaline. "Lead the way, Oliver." They raced back toward the Halfmoon estate, the incessant rain clattering against the cobblestones as though heralding their approach to some fateful revelation. The creaking door of the house loomed like a beleaguered sentry, the air inside heavy with danger and the scent of damp wood and unspoken fears. Oliver flung open the study door, a hasty motion that sent dust billowing into the stale air, swirling with the warmth of unraveling tensions. The sight that greeted them was not one of solace, but rather chaos. Papers scattered wildly, a testament to panic and discord. "It has to be here," Oliver insisted, scrambling over the floor strewn with documents. As the three of them began to search, Father Brown's gaze was inexorably drawn to the dusty bookshelf. Something felt amiss. A book protruded slightly, as if insisting on the attention it so desperately sought. He approached, running his fingers across the binding, the texture familiar, yet orders of poetic disarray. Then it struck him. A secret compartment. But what shall it reveal? Just at that moment, lightning struck close enough to tremble the ground beneath them, casting flickering shadows that danced along the walls. In that quivering light, Father Brown felt as though they were all caught in an intricate web of wicked design. He pulled the book from its resting place. It seemed oddly light, gibbering with the promise of revelation. And then he noticed it. The spine split open slightly at an unusual angle, revealing the glimmer of yellowed parchment tucked away, hidden from the world for too long. With trembling fingers, he pried it loose and held it up, illuminated by a brief flash of lightning that froze them in time. As he unfolded the document, dim, candlelight catching its edges, the air thickened with the weight of uncertainty. This could be it. The will. Each word wrought a verse of tension that seemingly sealed their fates. But just as he began to read, a loud crash echoed from the rear of the house, a sound so solid it felt as though time had shifted. The reverberation of chaos shimmered through the walls. "What was that?" Oliver shouted, his face paling further. But Father Brown was already moving, a quiet determination guiding him toward the sound. The will, sorry proof of a legacy so steeped in resentment and greed, could unravel everything. He could sense the clock ticking, the interplay of motives shaping the revelation to come, until suddenly, through the gathering shadows, a figure emerged holding a glinting object, eyes wild with a maelstrom of intent. "Stop! This was never meant for you," a voice rang out, dripping with menace, shattering the charged atmosphere. And in that moment of unveiled confrontation, Father Brown understood. The truth would demand a price far steeper than he ever could have imagined. Chapter 5. Shadows on the Garden Path. The night erupted as the unmistakable crack of a gunshot rang out, echoing against the storm-laden sky like a tear in the fabric of existence. Dark shapes flitted between the hedges of the estate's overgrown garden, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and imminent danger, while the wind howled, carrying with it an unholy symphony of thunder and desperation. Father Brown, heart racing in tandem with the echoes of chaos, dashed toward the source of the sound, mind horrified by the implications of a life shattered by greed. The thunder had barely subsided when another scream, raw and unfathomable, pierced the thick veil of night. "Oliver!" he shouted, instinctively glancing over his shoulder to ensure the young man remained close, though the lightning flash illuminated his pallid face, as if marking him as followable prey in a world gone awry. The shadows played tricks beneath the twisted branches, the garden presenting a gruesome tableau of tangled limbs and lurking malevolence. "Father, we must find out who was shot." Oliver's voice trembled, panic overtaking his bravado from moments before. "They might still be alive." "Alive?" Father Brown muttered, squinting into the darkness, fueled by an unwavering urgency. Yet his mind raced with the questions left hanging after that terrifying bang. He could feel the weight of the mysteries tightening around them, a sinister embrace of unresolved shadows eager to ensnare the unwary. Villagers' unrest, the subliminal whispers of betrayal linked back to Reginald, and the hidden will all wove together into an intricate tapestry of sin and suspicion. "Stay close," he commanded, setting forth through the maze of wild foliage, heart thrumming like the relentless rain above. His eyeglasses fogged with steam from his breath, he pushed deeper into the damp scent of revolted leaves and loamy soil. "Over here!" A sudden frantic gesture from Oliver sent them skirting around a thorny rosebush, revealing a small figure near the hedgerow, a shoeless woman, her white dress splattered with mud, shivering like a wraith brought forth from a haunted past. "Marie!" Oliver rushed to her side, lifting her by the shoulders, though he winced at the hollow look in her eyes. "What happened?" They shot him." Her words tumbled out, breathless and raw, sending a shockwave through Father Brown, who remained stoic despite the panic fluttering in his chest. "He was by the old fountain. We were arguing, and then a figure came out of the dark and—" She hesitated, wide eyes frantically searching, as if afraid of the shadows that bore witness to her fears. "A figure? What did they look like?" Father Brown pressed, reading the tremors in her voice as clues unto themselves. "Tall, cloaked. I couldn't see their face, but they had something shiny. A weapon." Her voice cracked, her body trembling, consumed by fragments of memory that seemed to swirl around her like the encroaching storm. "I'll find them," Oliver swore, but a weight settled heavy in Father Brown's gut. There was a glint of something unsettled in his young companion's eyes, a fleeting possessiveness wrapped in dread. "But you must stay here with Marie. Watch out for anyone approaching." With a single nod, Oliver returned to the woman, while Father Brown ventured forward, every instinct alert, guided by the tremors of tension wrapped within the foliage. The heartbeat of the estate pulsed loudly as he crouched by the fountain, braving the shadows. The enchanted ground, rumored to hold whispered secrets from years long past. He noticed footprints, shallow, timid impressions marred by the weather, but they betrayed a hurried passage. The confused pattern spoke of someone who had traveled quickly, startled perhaps by a sudden commotion. Yet another set, heavier, veered off to the left, misleading, inconclusive. It alerted him to the reality lurking beneath the surface, a cleverly laid pattern of deceit designed for those who would leap to conclusions born of fear. "Who are you, Shadow?" Father Brown murmured, running his fingers through the leaves, his heart pounding in rhythm against the undeniable mystery before him. The essence of the garden draped itself about him, pressing thick like an invisible blanket. A rustling, faint, yet deliberate, drew his eyes to movement by the trellis. Just a flicker, as if a ghost were flitting between the shadows. He squinted against the dim light and made sure his footsteps remained silent as he approached, aware that this might reveal more than intended. But lo, out of the depths sprang a familiar shape, Oliver trailing closer than Father Brown assumed. "I can't find anyone, Father," he exclaimed, lingering under the trellis, anxiety stark on his face. "I think they've vanished." At that moment, alert to the soft murmur of growing chaos behind them, Father Brown turned sharply. "Stay alert, Oliver. There is a deeper game at play here," he warned, his eyes on the retreating movement. Before he could absorb any more details, another echo of footsteps stirred through the garden like silent knives. The shadows loomed and twisted, as if the very air thickened with portentous intent. Just then, the unmistakable figure slipped into view, cloaked in darkness, hard edges beneath the thick fabric, making his heart race. A silent observer poised against the backdrop of despair. "You shouldn't be here, Father Brown," said the figure, voice whispering from the shadows, laced with menace. "Or perhaps you should be, if you're keen to uncover what lies beneath the surface of this garden." "Who are you?" Father Brown demanded, instincts churning, every sinew tense with accusation, for he felt the world tip precariously. The figure's face remained concealed, the sudden glint of metal barely visible, an unmistakable weapon aimed squarely upon him, glistening with foreboding and revelations yet untold. Those who seek the truth often find more than they bargained for. The tremor of their whispered warning hung thick and ominous like a storm cloud ready to unleash its fury. As another distant cry broke free from the oppressive night air, a pulse of instinct ignited within Father Brown. He stepped forward, casting aside caution like a veil to confront the unknown. But before words could leap forth, another gunshot cracked through the air, a sudden rustle cascading against the dark tapestry of gardens and hearts. And then darkness enveloped everything, silence crashing down like a shroud over the estate's most hidden of truths. Chapter 6. The Letter Left Unopened. The thunder cracked deafeningly overhead, drowning out the frantic heartbeat of Father Brown as he returned to the chaotic study, a storm of uncertainty howling in his mind. The chaotic tableau of papers and scattered inkpots lay before him like a twisted story waiting to be rewritten, a story marred by betrayal and death. Oliver, his voice reverberated against the damp wooden walls, urgency weaving through the air. Sallying forth, he needed to find the answers buried among the disarray, desperate to sift through the remains of shattered lives. His eyes flicked across the littered floor, filled with documents that whispered of unspoken secrets, a litter of distrust in their ink-stained edges. As he crouched low, carefully toying with the absence of order, the flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows, twisting into the foreboding shapes of memories long hidden. Just as a shiver ran down his spine, Oliver stumbled through the door, clutching a blood-stained letter, its surface marred and mottled, aglow like some sacred relic, whispering untold stories of heartbreak and anguish. "What have you found?" Father Brown asked, his heart clenching as he caught sight of the letter's ominous stains. An unopened letter," Oliver panted, handing it over, voice trembling with an apprehension that stirred the hairs on Father Brown's neck. It was in the squire's belongings, wedged behind the bookshelf. With a frown pinching his brow, Father Brown studied the missive, noticing the wax seal embossed with a crest he vaguely recognized, the same symbol that adorned the grave in the inconspicuous churchyard that marked the squire's resting place. It was meant for someone, clearly, yet the question remains, why wasn't it delivered? Pressing his thumb against the edge, he deepened his examination, one that slowly unraveled the sedated tension, hanging like a shroud in the candlelight. At first glance, the letter bore no sign of urgency, written in a careful script that belied the turmoil outside the windows. Yet, the damning shadows beckoned temptingly, implying a deeper connection amidst the swirling chaos of grief and doubt. "What does it mean, Father?" Oliver's voice broke through the fog of Father Brown's contemplation, the innocence embedded in his demeanor stark against the weightiness of the moment. "It hints at more than mere family squabbles," Father Brown mused, folding back the parchment slowly, deliberately, as if unveiling a grave secret, each inch pulling him deeper into a chasm of unearthly suspense. "This letter bears a portent of longing, of unresolved attachments." But as he rifled through the contents, a new sound broke through the air, distant voices mixed with the clamor of rain against the window panes, accompanying the chaos swirling in the village beyond. "They're beginning to suspect," Oliver murmured, dread knitting his brows together. "It's as if the air is thick with accusations, Father. They've turned on each other." "Fear breeds suspicion, Oliver," Father Brown replied, already piecing together the fragments of discontent simmering beneath the surface of the community. "When life is struck by tragedy, it becomes all too easy for the truth to be lost among the shadows." The letter's ink, blurred in Father Brown's hands. A reveal ignited in the weighted air, but the words eluded his understanding. The name at the top, unaddressed to anyone in particular, caromed around his mind. He had known that name, an acquaintance, yet it was like recalling a forgotten sense, slipping away further into memory with each passing second. And then abruptly, lower down the page, he caught a reference, a single phrase nestled tenderly among the ink. The truth will shield you, bind your heart, and break your soul. Suddenly the door burst open with a rush, colliding against the wall, the unexpected weight of tension, carrying an unwelcome guest. Marie appeared, breathless and wide-eyed, her form marked by terror. She stumbled into the room, eyes darting frantically before they settled on Father Brown. "They're gathering outside, Father. A mob. They think they know who's to blame, who's guilty." Father Brown's heart lurched at her words. Without delay, he whisked the letter, tucking it hastily into his pocket as he rose. "Then let us not keep them waiting. We have much to untangle before the weight of ignorance leads to further peril." Escaping the confines of the study, the storm hung in the air like a shroud, thick and foreboding. Outside, the villagers clamored at the edge of darkness, their faces illuminated by sporadic flashes of lightning, each person a portrait of suspicion and accusation, voices blending into a cacophony of paranoia. "Father, someone has to be brought to justice," shouted a voice from the depths of the throng, thick with anxiety. "We cannot let this murder go unpunished." "Justice, my friends," Father Brown began, raising his voice to penetrate the suffocating tension, though the words escaped him, like a plea sent forth on trembling wings, "is sometimes a sword with two edges. Do not let your thirst for retribution blind you to the truth." But as the crowd shifted, a figure emerged from the shadows, cloaked in darkness like the stormy night around them. The figure held aloft a glint of silver, recognizable, a glimmer that sent terror coursing through Father Brown's veins. With a sickening sensation swirling in the pit of his stomach, he realized the figure clutched not only a weapon, but also the very same letter that had slipped through his fingers. "Father Brown," the figure intoned, the voice muffled yet recognizable through the clamor, "you're about to learn just how deeply this web of deceit runs. The truth, it will either free you or bind you eternally. Perhaps you should have left it unopened." And with that, in a heartbeat marred by the distant toll of church bells, echoing a mournful note through the stormy night, the figure vanished back into the shadows, leaving Father Brown reeling as the crowd surged forward, and the fickle winds of fate spun anew around him. Secrets that had once lingered quietly now clawed their way into the open, leaving the storm outside to pale in comparison to the impending whirlwind of truth that hung menacingly overhead. Chapter 7. A Confession of Convenience. The flash of lightning illuminated the back alley's dank walls, revealing a crumpled figure pressing against the doorway of Madame Lemaire's seamstress shop. As the night's gathering storm synced with the restless thumping of Father Brown's heart, a scream pierced the swirling storm outside, clutching at the stillness within him like a hand around his throat, amplifying the sense of urgency that gripped him. Flickering shadows danced beneath the flickering street lamps, each cast image stirring the depths of innocence and guilt swirling in the dank air. The iron taste of foreboding lingered as he approached, beads of rain mingling with the sweat of anxiety clinging to him like a shroud, a constant reminder of the chaotic evening he'd just endured. "Madame Lemaire," he called, voice soaring over the hammering rain, compelling and insistent. "I must speak with you. It's of utmost importance." The heavy door creaked open, revealing the timid seamstress standing within, face pale and drawn, eyes bright with apprehension. The muffled thunder boomed in the distance, a sonorous echo punctuating the tension that draped itself over the dim-lit room, like the heavy woolen fabric scattered across her workshop floor. "Father, what brings you here in such wretched weather?" Her voice quivered, as tentative as a candle's flame in a tempest. Behind her, the faint scent of linseed oil mingled with anguish, whispering of unfinished garments and untold stories, a secret language only the fabric could unveil. "Is it the murder? Knowing the chaos in the village, I cannot risk a scandal." "Yes, a scandal indeed," he replied, stepping over the threshold, acutely aware of the heavy air, thick with the weight of concealed truths. "But there is more at stake than mere gossip. I believe you hold a thread upon which this entire web might unravel." As her eyes darted away, his instincts flared to life, honing in on the nuance of her movements, the way her fingers fidgeted with the hem of her apron, the slight quiver in her lip that hinted at a hidden layer beneath her calculated calm. Madame le Maire exhaled heavily, reluctant to meet his gaze. "Oh, Father, I have heard things, whispers through the windows. You must understand, I see so little, and I'm but an innocent bystander." Her voice slipped, tinged with desperation. "Innocent bystanders often foresee more than they let on," Father Brown pressed, noting a small, folded piece of fabric peeking out from her work basket, a vivid red that seemed to pulse with its own urgency in the dim light. "You witnessed something, didn't you? Or perhaps heard something you shouldn't have." Her expression hardened, and she shook her head vehemently. I merely see what passes through. Stitching, mending. It is not my place." A clap of thunder interrupted her, drowning her trailing words as Father Brown almost instinctively turned toward the window. Rain lashed against the glass like a frantic heartbeat. When his gaze returned to her, he saw fear etched on her face, mingled with conviction. "But those footsteps, Father, the sound of shuffling," she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They're not new. They came before the storm, before the cries." "Who, Madame?" he pressed, his heart thrumming with the rhythm of an incipient revelation. "There are lives at stake, lives teetering on the knife edge of suspicion. You hold the key to understanding. You've come to me, but what if I am the trap?" Her words fell out like drops of rain, hesitant and drenched with uncertainty. Her eyes turned downward, compelling Father Brown's gaze toward the work basket, where the red piece of fabric trembled, a vivid sliver of deceit hidden amid the mundane remnants of her craft. "Is this part of the fabric from the squire's clothing?" he inquired, a note of urgency punctuating his tone. "I saw him. A heavy woolen coat, wasn't it? Squired with purpose before he met his fateful end." He stepped closer, tilting his head as she cradled the fabric. "It bears the weight of blood, though more metaphorically perhaps. Would it not be so if you stitched a garment for him? You'd know the texture, the color, the thread." No, it couldn't be," she stammered, shifting uncomfortably, but Father Brown allowed his intuition to guide him. "It was given to me on a chill morning, Father," she murmured much too quickly. "Perhaps a gift, a patron's abandoned fabric. I simply—" "A gift?" Father Brown interjected, a slow smile creeping across his lips, a smile that held a deep-seated understanding. "We must discard that notion with the same discarded fabric. A gift has a ring of sincerity, of clarity. The fabric you hold ties you to the truth, madame. Why the hesitation? Heavy silence answered him, and in that suffocating quietude, Father Brown could see her mere tenacity faltering. "I didn't choose to know, Father," she whispered, her frail voice a fragile echo against the storm. "I've heard, seen things I wish to ignore. A certain visitor, a man whose face I could not recall. He came to the back, gave me this fabric, and hurried off, but I heard nothing of what happened next, only screams. Then he's entangled you in this business." His brow furrowed as his mind churned like the storm outside, myriad thoughts spinning into webs of speculation. "He meant for you to be a pawn, hidden away from the key moments surrounding the squire's demise. But your sight is sharper than you realize." As their gazes locked, tension thickened, and Father Brown sensed a deeper shade within her, a fear not just of being exposed as a witness, but as a player in a game bearing deadly stakes. "He was anxious," she finally confessed, her voice trembling. "He spoke of fabric, fabrics thieved then discarded in haste. It wasn't true, was it?" "Many lives are intertwined in lies, madame, and you may well be at the pivot," he replied solemnly, yet conviction pulsating through his words like a steady flame, illuminating the growing shadows around them. "Your connection to this leads us closer to the truth, yet it also puts you at risk. We must tread cautiously." Suddenly, amid their intense exchange, the bell above the shop's door swung violently as a figure burst inside, rain-soaked and cloaked in agitation. With an icy glance that could slice through flesh, the newcomer raised a jagged dagger, flashing in the candlelight. "Le Maire!" the voice roared, cold and unforgiving, laced with venomous urgency. Father Brown felt a repulsion of realization. This was no ordinary visitor. The storm outside raged with fury, yet within these walls time hung suspended, imbued with the electric tension of impending violence. "Too many secrets," the intruder spat, casting a baleful eye over Father Brown and the trembling seamstress, lurking at the edge of revelation. "You will either speak, or I'll unravel what you've sown forever." In that moment, thunder clapped, as if punctuating the weight of their fate, the jagged blade glinting ominously against the candle's flickering flame. The walls reverberated with a thunderous climax, and Father Brown, heart racing, understood one thing above all. Tonight, the truth would either shield them or leave them utterly exposed. Chapter 8. The Echoes of the Past. The musty air of the archive room clung to Father Brown like a web of whispered secrets, and as he pried open the brittle ledger, the flickering light of his candle illuminated a passage that seemed to pulse with a life of its own, one of long-buried scandals and dangerous truths. The sudden crash of thunder announced itself with a startling ferocity, reverberating through the timbered walls and stealing his breath. The scent of damp parchment mixed with the sharp tang of anxiety, and he could hear distant gasps, like echoes of a haunting melody suspended between the present and some forgotten tragedy, reverberating in his mind. He leant closer, straining to discern the faded ink beneath the flickering flame, as frenzied memories surged forth. The death of the squire, the village's simmering resentments, all winding together like the roots of a gnarled tree. Each stitch in the fabric of life seemed woven with peril, and as he turned a worn page, the mention of a blood-stained affair caught the edge of his perception. Names turned into whispers, and each influx of lightning cast grotesque shadows across the ledger, etching a story of betrayal and vengeance into the very air he breathed. "Not Dunford," he murmured to himself, the revelation unfurling in the dim light. "It cannot be." He read the name again, a ghost in his memory from whispered conversations. The name of a man whose life was intertwined with the squire's in ways unspoken. There it lay, inked in black on dimming pages. A debt, a scandal that marked the village like a brand of shame. A transaction that veered darkly into the realm of vendetta. The scream of a gull echoed from the coastal winds, but within him blazed a tempest of urgency. He couldn't shake the feeling he'd unearthed a seed, planted some time ago, threatening to bloom into violence. Footsteps echoed through the archway, and Father Brown instinctively froze, clutching the ledger as if it were a talisman against looming shadows. As the door swung open, filling the small room with gusting wind and rain, the figure that entered was draped in an oilskin cloak, water streaming from the edges. Old Gwendolen, the village librarian, stood there, her face a shifting canvas of apprehension mingled with a desperate hope. "Father, they've mostly stepped out of their minds, muttering of murder and maudlin tales," she said, her voice trembling against the drum of rain. "They suspect the squire had a hand in the hidden death of young Bill, and in the ruckus, secrets are spilling from every corner like river water. The echoes of the past seem to have a moat of blood running through them," Father Brown replied, keenly aware that within Gwendolen's gaze lay half-spoken fears. "But I fear it's far more tangled than that." He gestured to the ledger, the brittle pages fluttering as a gust ruffled through like a whispered memory. "Did you know of a man named Dunford, a creditor, somehow linked to the squire?" The name slipped from his lips like a cipher into earnest minds. Her brow knotted deeply as she crossed the room, barely noticing the drenching raindrops trailing from her cloak. "Dunford, a shadow flits through history. Vengeance has a long grass, my friend, and even shadows can wield blades in darkness. They say he sought compensation for a debt, but whispers tell of a more illicit secret, tales of shares and arms twisted behind closed doors. Bill may have seen more than he should have." Father Brown's heart faltered at the implication, the intonation of unrevealed truths sinking into the marrow of his bones. And now a life dangles on the transactions sketched in blood. But what was Bill to him? What tangled web have I stumbled upon? The parchment crinkled under his touch, and as Gwendolen's eyes widened, the air thickened palpably around them. Bill was a mere gardener, but the roots of his work lay near the squire's beloved estate. "You see," she whispered, caution, draped like a shroud. "The squire had grand designs, on the surface of decency, yet his life was sown with fabric darker than graveyard soil." Their conversation hung heavy, every detail laden with unspeakable weight, when suddenly the candle flickered for a moment, casting crooked shadows that danced devilishly with the wind. Father Brown peered closer at the ledger, and as he did, an innocuous piece of paper slipped out from between the pages, fluttering to the floor like a fallen leaf. Leaning down, he picked it up, his heart beating louder than the storm outside as he carefully adjusted the light to read its contents. "Meet me at dusk, where the shadows deepen," he whispered, swallowing his breath. The note bore the unmistakable curl of familiar handwriting, Madame Le Maire's flourished letters, laced with fervent urgency. But next to those words, a thumbprint blurred the ink, a smudge of crimson, like a seed of dread sown in haste. Father Brown's pulse quickened, the connection knitting together as the ghosts of those lost drifted dangerously close. "Father," Gwendolen's voice sliced through his thoughts, a crucible of fear and determination. "What are you thinking? We must warn Madame le Maire. If she knows of this—" But then a shocking sound, a crack like thunder, echoed through the archive, drowning her voice in its finality. The grim door connected to the outside world burst open again. A figure stepped in, their face shrouded beneath a cap, drenched and menacing. "What have you found?" the voice growled, thick with deceit, as it slid against the air. "And what have you whispered about me?" Father Brown's heart plummeted, recognition sparking, yet drowned beneath layers of urgency. As the figure stepped forward, shaking rivulets of rain from their coat, the candle flickered violently, the flame dancing like a white heart in the roast. Its last flicker began to fade. Here, in this moment, decisions hung in the balance, as if fate had unveiled its bitter heart. With his hand gripping a tarnished dagger flashing from the newcomer's belt, Father Brown understood, in the inklings of a fading light, that the past was not yet buried. It was rising alight with the kind of fury that demanded blood. The air crackled with tension, a painful crescendo leading to destruction as Gwendolen gasped, eyes wide, a realization dawning like an unholy spectre. "Run!" Father Brown whispered as the sudden clang of thunder shattered through the room. But it was too late, for at that moment, amidst the fury of the storm, a terrible revelation struck. A shadow darker than he could have ever fathomed had drawn itself before him, poised, almost eager for the taste of vengeance, ready to strike in a world exploding with the truths long locked away in agony. The edges of this echo would see no resolution today. Chapter 9. A Trap of Trust. The thunder crashed overhead with such fury that the stained glass window shivered as if in fear, the bright shards of color momentarily casting a kaleidoscope of shadows across the worn wooden floor of the village hall. Gripped in an icy web of panic, Father Brown stood in the midst of a gathering that had teetered into chaos, his heart pounding with the urgency of his unraveling thoughts. Shouts erupted outside as villagers clamored, echoing a terrifying mixture of suspicion and fervor, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and the lingering promise of bloodshed. "Father, you must understand." Mrs. Whitley, the butcher's wife, cried, her voice trembling above the din, her complexion as pale as the moonlight breaking through the fierce storm. "It's Dunford. He's been stirring the pot too long. He means to destroy us all." Her clenched fists shook as if they were wrenching an imaginary throat, yet her eyes darted to the corner of the room where the ever-cunning Dunford stood, fingers deftly fretting with the brim of his hat, a deceptive smile lurking beneath the shadows. Fear itself has wrapped its tendrils around this gathering, Father Brown mused under his breath, an acute awareness of how quickly friendships could splinter in a tempest of lies and whispered rumors. The flickering light of the old kerosene lamps could not push back the growing darkness that had crept into their hearts, and as the bell tolled overhead, it seemed to herald not hope, but herald danger. A stunning revelation hovering just above the precipice of discovery. "Listen to reason," he commanded, stepping forward, his presence a grounded anchor, founded on principles of faith. "Let us not succumb to the whims of our fears. A scapegoat will not lead us to the truth, but away from it. The fabric of our community is woven together, despite the needle of suspicion planting discord among us." But even as he spoke, the truth settled heavy like rain-soaked cloth. Something was amiss in the air. The atmosphere thickened around Dunford, charged like the atmosphere before a lightning strike. Father Brown cast a careful glance across the room, his keen eyes charting the sea of faces, from the man standing with clenched fists to the woman in the far corner, peering through her fingers, her breath fast and shallow. A tapestry of complicity shrouded them, unseen threads tying them tighter than loyalty demanded, in a desperate bid to extract the soon hidden truths lurking within their hearts. Father Brown addressed the gathering. "What is lacking amongst us is trust. Tonight, I propose we play a little game, a demonstration of sorts." He gestured toward the adjoining room, where a set of dark-tinted screens lay at rest, awaiting their purpose. Those with secrets must unburden themselves, if we are to face the storm brewing outside with the clarity of night. Murmurs scattered through the crowd, a blend of trepidation and intrigue, as the men and women exchanged confused glances. "What manner of folly is this?" Dunford challenged, his voice rising like smoke in a gale, but was met with silence. The inhabitants of the village hall steadied themselves under the scrutiny of their own ambitions and fears, though one figure among them seemed unshaken, the treacherous calm of Madame le Maire. With a silent resolve, Father Brown beckoned her closer. "Will you start, Madame?" he implored, kindness woven through his tone, urging her to spill the ink of her own secret. But her light laughter danced over his request, smooth as obsidian's edge. "You don't seek to trap me in my confessions, do you? You with your hallowed piety?" The air between them crackled, and though she smirked, Father Brown's gaze did not falter. Within that smile lay danger, festering like an untended wound. "Not you, Madame le Maire," he replied, sensing the undercurrents that pulled at her too neatly woven skirt. "But perhaps the fabric of your knowledge, who stands to benefit should their alliance remain hidden." His words sliced through her defenses as she paused, confusion flickering in her eyes. Yet behind her, another shadow emerged. "Enough!" Dunford barked, raising a hand, palms splayed like a warning against the probing questions. "This is neither the time nor the place for your parlor games." His facade trembled as anger seeped through, raw and palpable. "You'll find no rot here." But perhaps the truth lied well hidden in the crevices of his fury. Father Brown felt a stirring in his gut, mirroring the tempest brewing outside, and his mind whirled with possibilities. "Do you perceive yourself as innocent amongst such treachery?" he mused aloud, casting a glance at the weather-beaten door under which rain pooled like a gathering abyss. "We must uncover this farce. Trust may need to be a sacrifice for something as fragile as friendship." As the weight of accusation expanded in the air, Gwendolen slipped close, her fingers clutching the ledger from their earlier encounter, eyes wide with urgent knowledge. "Father, this ledger, it may not just speak of debts, but may hold the very key to secrets unspooled," she said, craning her neck as if the book were a coiled serpent, and before he could raise a hand to take it, a clash of thunder split overhead, reverberating like a tragic symphony of fate. The lights dimmed for a heart-stopping second, and when they flicked back to life, gasps filled the room. The ledger now lay open on a table that had not witnessed its passage moments before. Scrawled onto the fragile paper was a series of names, each ringing with familiarity, names of the gathered. "Now look," Father Brown pressed, trailing his fingers across the ink as the scent of iron hung palpably in the air. "What debt binds us together?" The gasps swelled, voices trembled like leaves flitting on the cusp of autumn's chill, when suddenly an initial shot rang out like chaos, sharp and unforgiving. A scream erupted from Madame le Maire, her visage twisting, as she fell backwards against the wall, blood spilling from a gash across her arm. The beautiful fabric of her dress now stained with a crimson omen. Father Brown dashed forward, a whirl of grey, heart leaping into his throat as he maneuvered through shocked faces and frenzied calculations of guilt among them. Which of you had the motive to harm her? A split second hung dreadfully long, intentions inscrutable as chaos erupted. A mass of friends turned enemies, calculating the distance between trust and betrayal. And then he heard a voice behind him, infused with malice, and now unmistakably cold. She always did like to meddle in affairs better left untouched. Wouldn't you agree, Father? Slowly, he turned, caught in the web of light and shadow, the air thickening with dread, cloaked in the realization that one of them was playing a more perilous game than anticipated, while the storm outside raged with an echo of threats untold. The flickering lamplights highlighted the malevolence lurking, and as the hastily stifled gasps cascaded into the stony silence, Father Brown unwrapped the truth like a ripe fruit in the heart of darkness. Trusting the wrong person could be the deadliest gamble of all. Through clenched teeth, he whispered, "Time to carve out the truth from the heart of deception." But where could the truth be found amid such engineered chaos? The ghosts of yesterday loomed large. He realized, in that pulse of impending dread, that a trap, his trap of trust, was already being set. The next shot might not be a mere echo. Chapter 10. The Revelation of the Heart. The roar of thunder rolled through the dim hall like a beast unleashed, tossing candles into fluttering panic and magnifying the darkness that seeped into every corner. Father Brown stepped forward as he heard a piercing scream, a sound both full of terror and revelation echoing against the stone walls, a chorus that bellowed of truth and deceit. Illuminated by the wavering glow of the kerosene lamps, Madame le Maire slumped, blood trickling down her arm in crimson ribbons that streaked her pristine dress, marking the floor with a grim narrative. The air was saturated with the metallic scent of iron, a sickly sweet tang that tightened around Father Brown's throat as the weight of chaos settled upon the congregation. "Gather yourselves," he commanded, his voice cutting through the pandemonium like a knife through the fog of fear, though no one seemed capable of comprehension within the storm of realization. "Do not let your panic be a weapon against one another." His heart raced as the eyes of those gathered darted between one another, fingers twitching toward accusations like moths drawn to a lethal flame. Dunford, still hovering near the shadows, leaned against the wall, his face sinister and unreadable, though the sheen of sweat upon his brow betrayed his interior struggle. "Is this the consequence of your clever games, Father?" His voice dripped with disdain, but Father Brown could see the fibers of fear fraying at the edges of Dunford's bravado. "You could have left her alone." The depth of menace in Dunford's eyes hinted at an unquenchable thirst for authority, a desperate need for control amid the turbulent tempests of suspicion. The gathering swirled around him like leaves caught in a storm, each person ensnared by their own versions of loyalty, betrayal, and neglect, all whirling dangerously close to a fierce implosion. "Madame le Maire, can you speak?" Father Brown asked, kneeling beside her as a trickle of blood continued to seep and puddle into the worn floorboards. The oppressive humidity of the storm seemed to cradle the tension in the air, amplifying every heartbeat, every whispered breath. She winced, but managed to meet his gaze, eyes wide, reflecting the flickering lamplights, a sliver of the truth shining through the chaos. "There are debts, Father," she gasped, her voice strained but resolute, each word pulling those surrounding her closer, as if an unintentional magnetism was drawing forth the hidden truths. "Not all debts can be settled with currency." A shudder rippled through her, a reminder of how easily the secrets of the village glimmered beneath the surface, waiting to strike like low tide upon the fragile sands of their lives. "What did you mean?" Father Brown prodded gently, knowing the storms of human emotion were often the fiercest, burying revelations beneath layers of pride and revenge. "What kind of debt?" Her breath hitched, and in the beat that passed, he sensed the heavy shadows lurking inside her. "I didn't mean harm. They'll hurt us if we don't unite." With every syllable, there was an echo of fragile alliances whispering in the corners, secrets pressed against rib cages like spells waiting to be revealed. Gwendolen, clutching the ledger tight against her chest, exchanged a look with Father Brown, clearly grasping the significance of Madame Lemaire's words. "Madame, were you keeping a ledger of debts?" Gwendolen asked, her voice a sharp needle in the fabric of their shared dread. The urgency rippled as Father Brown glanced back at the ledger, now lying open upon the table, its pages revealing not just names, but alliances that danced dangerously close to betrayal. With every rustle of paper seemed a gathering storm, fueled by accusations long hidden beneath the village facade. "Speak," Dunford barked, the sharpness of his tone igniting the air between them as the others flinched, throwing questioning glances his way. "You want to accuse me? With what provocation? What motive could I possibly have?" Father Brown's eyes narrowed, picking apart the threads of Dunford's rising, manipulative fury. "Innocence has a way of revealing itself through the cracks of hysteria," he observed, his voice low, his gaze unwavering. "You, seeking the assurance of silence, harboring debts that fog your vision." "Father, Madame Lemaire stuttered, struggling to elevate her voice but faltering as she pressed a hand to the wound, figuring the angle to be precise, gauging those standing behind her. But Dunford's voice erupted like a storm's fury. "Enough. This farce ends now," he proclaimed, and for a fleeting moment, the confidence in his manner turned the eyes of suspicion toward him, new doubts settling upon the fabric of his claims. "You are only guilty of inciting chaos." "No," Father Brown interjected, sensing the fragile core of mistrust splintering the threshold into violence. "You speak as if clear of sin. But remember, Dunford, the heart can hide vile truths beneath a shiny veneer." He took a step closer, drawing on the gravity of every word. "Someone shot Madame Lemaire. Someone who believed a debt could be settled in blood." Suddenly, a scuffle sounded near the door. Someone was trying to escape the confines of their growing entrapment. Father Brown spun toward the noise, eyes catching Gwendolen, looking as if she were on the verge of revealing paragraphs of a hidden script that no one else could decipher. "Where are you?" "Going," he called out. "I have to find—" she began, her voice cracking, but abruptly faltered as a wave of uncertainty rolled through the crowd. The moment hung suspended, a laugh teetering on the edge of realization before being swallowed whole by the storm outside. With tension electrifying the air, Father Brown seized the fleeting moment of vulnerability that Gwendolen had provided. "Gwendolen, wait! You cannot—" But before he could reach her, the heavier sound of thunder clashed again, drowning his voice amidst the cacophony, and a stark flash of light peered through the darkness, illuminating a fleeting silhouette in the doorway before vanishing into the chaos. Father Brown's heart constricted. The sense of foreboding rose like smoke in a spotlight. Something has changed, he breathed, the realization coiling tightly around him. The cluster of debts might not just be financial, but rather the tangled up in morals. As the darkness threatened to swallow them once again, a jolt of visceral dread took hold of him. For now, the answers twisted in a clandestine dance, the heart of deception pulsing in the shadows, and he could not yet see where it would lead. Then, abruptly, from the recesses of the hall, came a voice cloaked in foreboding, a jarring counterpoint to the storm outside. "Father, did you forget about the missing letters?" The finality of that statement cracked through the brooding silence, and dread washed over him anew. There they were, blood-stained, revelations threatening to fracture every commitment they ever held as sacred. The mystery deepened, darkness approached, and by the flickering light, Father Brown realized that to conquer the heart of the matter, a formidable sacrifice loomed, a choice between truth and protection, with no comforting resolution in sight. He stood at the precipice of a grotesque realization, the dance of life and death weaving tightly around them, and in that moment, the very world around him shattered as the next gunshot rang out. Chapter 11. The last piece of the puzzle. A thunderous crash of glass shattered the dimness, raining shards like jagged stars upon the floor, as Gwendolyn's scream pierced through the thick, heavy air, overshadowing the distant rumblings of the storm. In the flickering light of the candles, casting grotesque shadows against the stone walls, Father Brown could scarcely comprehend the raw terror etched across her face. The sanctuary of reason was collapsing into chaos, urgency clawing at his mind as the acrid scent of blood mingled with the damp earthiness of the hall. "What have you done?" he gasped, his heart pounding like a caged beast against his ribs, the dangerously swift thoughts swirling through his mind as his gaze darted toward the frantic congregation. "Father," Gwendolyn gasped again, hands trembling as they pointed toward the far corner where a figure lurked. "It's not Dunford. It can't be him. Look at the letters." Her voice broke, sending a new wave of tension crashing through the room, exacerbated by the storm's relentless storm outside, each gust of wind howling as if it understood the perilous game unfolding within the walls. She clutched an envelope tightly, its heavy seal glinting ominously, whilst the other members grew withdrawn and anxious, exchanging furtive whispers that cut through the gathering darkness. Sweat trickled down Father Brown's brow as he hurried toward Gwendolyn. "Show me what you have," he commanded, struggling against the sheer weight of anticipation coiling in the air, much like the lightning that flickered ominously beyond the small window panes. She faltered, opening the envelope carefully, revealing letters that, illuminated by the trembling candlelight, hinted at unspoken affections and dark promises. "These reveal debts owed in more than coins," she murmured, her voice quivering on the brink of revelation. Father Brown felt a chill creep down his spine as he scanned the cramped texts, discernible handwriting that cried out of withheld emotions and hidden motivations. Each phrase, tinged with desperation, seemed to unravel the threads of their entangled lives. "These names," he muttered, piecing together the murky connections, "these are not merely debts of money, but of hearts, of desires sowed in betrayal." Dunford, lingering near the shadows, interjected, his voice cold as steel. "You do not comprehend what dangers you're dabbling in, Father. Those letters hold power beyond measure." His words dripped with urgency a lifeline thrown into the currents of truth. Power? Father Brown echoed, scanning the horrified faces around him. Or poison? Each word is a confession wrapped in silence, but tell me, who, in their arrogance, risks loss of the soul? The murmurs filled the room again, a tempest of guilty fears, swirling tighter around every individual as the shadows twisted and turned with their unspeakable thoughts. My love for her, Dunford finally confessed, anger and vulnerability woven tightly. My motives were never entwined with anything but ambition. The flash of agony in his eyes betrayed conviction, darkness swirling beneath the surface. But do not mistake my passion as intent to harm. The stakes were not to be bloodied. Before anyone could counter his declarations, the tension shifted once more. Without warning, Madame le Maire, pale and quivering, rose from where she had fallen, blood still staining her dress like a morbid opal. "You misunderstand, Dunford," she rasped, gripping the table for support, her breath labored. "You mistake the edge of fury for strength. Protecting ourselves from perils buried deep within is often a more treacherous affair than mere threats." A deep silence filled the space, as if the very room was alive, absorbing their confessions and secrets. Father Brown crossed his arms, allowing the weight of the moment to unfurl. "Then confess fully, dear madame, for a heart can bleed louder than a wound ever could." His voice was gentle, but underlined with a razor's edge of inquiry as he sought the truth hidden below layers of betrayal and fear. They involved love and loss, ghosts of the past, returning with a vengeance. Le Maire sliced at the protracted silence, the panic rushing back into the depths of her eyes, her words long buried, erupting like a volcano. "We've neglected what binds us. Our histories are interwoven, debts paid in lives instead of currency. One mark on the ledger will bring down this house of cards." The tension, rippling through the air, suddenly manifested in movement. Something stirred in the shadows, a dark form darting past the doorway. "Stop!" Father Brown shouted, instinctively turning toward the movement, sensing something darker roiling just beneath the surface. But it was too late. A thunderous crash boomed as a scattered chair toppled over, revealing a thin slip of paper that had fluttered unnoticeably onto the rickety floor, bearing a few scribbled words. "You should never have left. Time to settle scores." Father Brown's stomach dropped. "Score," he repeated, the weight of the word sinking into the very marrow of his bones. "And what do we call this but a prelude to resurrection? Debts once settled in blood do not remain in the shadows for long." He stepped forward, shaking hands, reaching down toward the menacing note, every nerve ending alight with a realization that the very groundwork of their fellowship might betray them. Just as he retrieved the damning evidence, the candlelight flickered violently, dimming for a fleeting second, and a horrendous scream erupted from within the storm building outside. The hairs on Father Brown's neck stood alarmingly on end as, in that moment of chaos, another figure emerged from the depths of the gloom, silhouetted against the doorway. "I submit." The voice trembled from the darkness, the masked figure revealing its two familiar features, guilt-stricken eyes illuminated by the raging tempest beyond. Before plunging into the fray, racing toward Father Brown with an imploring look. But then the darkness swallowed them whole. Panic spread anew throughout the room as Father Brown's heart raced. The specter of betrayal loomed heavily, constraining the air with its suffocating grip. As he turned the note over in his trembling grasp, the sound of another gunshot detonated across the darkness, from somewhere outside, leaving him breathless, teetering on the precipice of a greater revelation yet to come. Chapter 12. The Mercy Beyond the Crime. The blade of lightning split the night sky with a ferocious elegance, illuminating the dimly lit hall just long enough for Father Brown to glimpse the figure, pale, trembling, and unmasked, dashing towards him, desperation dancing in her wide eyes like moths in a flame. The tension in the air was palpable, thickened by the scent of fear and the lingering coppery taste of blood, a vile concoction simmering within the heavy atmosphere. Instinctively, his heart surged with impending dread, and thoughts raced wildly like the wind outside, carrying with them the echoes of what had just unfolded. The gunshot ringing like an ill-fated bell, each note steeped in secrets now clawing for release. "Father, Gwendolyn's voice trembled, choked with terror, yet buoyed by an undercurrent of desperation and something deeper. The need for absolution, or perhaps a spectre of forgiveness, hung between them like damp mist. She clutched the fallen letter close to her chest, skin pale as the moonlight illuminating her visage, before another bolt lit the stormy night. I know the truth," she whispered, and with those words she stepped beyond the veil of shadows and doubts, revealing layers entwined with love, deceit, and grief. The frenzied crowd behind him was a tapestry of horror, the faces contorted between accusations and horror, caught in a maelstrom of shared dread. "Father, you must listen. It was never about Dunford or revenge." Her voice broke, unraveling like thread from a spool, memories clashing with the present, straining against their constraints. Beads of sweat traced down Father Brown's forehead, trying desperately to connect the threads of her revelation as they shone darkly like stars sucked into the void. "Gwendolyn," Father Brown urged gently, closing the distance that the chaos had momentarily forged, "tell me exactly what you mean. Speak the truth without fear of the consequences." Before she could respond, a distant rumble echoed from the storm beyond, reminiscent of an approaching army marching with inevitable destruction. But his thoughts were drawn back to Gwendolyn, who stepped closer, her voice just above the sound of thunder. "These letters, they were written for a reason," she implored, each word falling like heavy droplets in the stagnant air, stirring the cacophony of voices, questioning their beliefs and loyalties. "They unite us, but they also condemn, trapping us in webs spun by our own hands. I couldn't let it happen again." "Unite?" Dunford's voice snapped through the air, slow and deliberate, but laden with a simmering rage. He stepped forward, his figure a dark silhouette against the flickering candles, brow furrowed, shoulders squared, an apparition of confrontation against the muted cries for clarity. "If they unite us, then they must lead us towards justice. Do you hear me?" The intensity behind his proclamation sent shudders through those around. "You risk our survival with your loose lips, Gwendolyn. That's not just passion, that is a reckless confessional." Father Brown watched tensions brewing within the room, the accusations merging into a hazy web of blame, masquerading as clarity. Yet within Gwendolyn's eyes flickered a defiance, as though she had found a hidden anthem within her turmoil, calling for resolution beyond despair. "You wouldn't understand. I lost him to the very debts that now suffocate our ties. I can't allow history to repeat itself." The urgency coursing through her poured forth, heavy like the unleashed rain outside drumming mercilessly against the stone edifice of their fears. In the silence, Father Brown murmured, contemplating the unnerving revelation that lay hidden within her words, lies a deeper truth. Debt cannot truly be paid in blood, but rather in the marrow of the heart, where love and sacrifice coexist. He felt the weight of the moment escalate under the dying candlelight as it flickered dangerously, shadows twisting into grotesque shapes around them. But we must recognize the true weight of our actions. Mercy is the only path toward understanding. Yet, who among us is willing to reach for it? Dunford, almost palming the table beneath him in a gesture of feigned control, let out a weary, mocking laugh that triggered a ripple of murmurs through the crowd, each questioning the thoroughness of their plotted paths laid upon desolation. Mercy, you are lost if you think a heart steeped in crime will find redemption in weakness. We must pursue justice. Just like you pursued her love, Madame le Maire interjected bitterly from the corner, now scanning the faces around her, lips gleaming with bloodstains atop the anger of unyielding truth. Where was your mercy when she felt the flames of your ambition? As the words hung in the charged air, it became evident that every revelation, driven forth by blood-tinted letters, desperate confessions, and personal vendettas, maintained an inextricable link. Father Brown understood now. The locus of conflict settled not merely in the flickers of betrayal, but in deeper roots, hearts bound together by a thread of loss, promising reprisal rather than understanding. Dunford, you harbor darkness, Father Brown said, voice lowered but decisive. Fear, rage, and love have interwoven your existence. You're poised to protect yourself eternally, yet at what cost? Do you see the path before you? For you are seeking to exact justice, yet standing with a weapon. The truth hung heavily, like a storm cloud, ready to break anew. Before he could conclude, another peal of thunder resonated, shaking the walls and silencing the cacophony of suspicion that swirled among the villagers. Father Brown's keen eyes darted towards Gwendolen, as the hollowness in Dunford's heart echoed between them, each heartbeat thunderous in its finality. Life danced upon razor's edge. If he didn't act, another shot might sound, perhaps even less forgiving than the first. Suddenly, the laughter of the storm outside crescendoed, a freeze of shadow, soaking the flickering light as another storm of emotion swept in. A glance from Gwendolen, revealing the buried truth. Her eyes, no longer merely fragile, burned fiercely. The shooter wanted to protect, not kill. The cry rang through the confusion, shifting the momentum in the chamber towards a nameless phantasm haunting their minds. But then she faltered, and her gaze turned to a shadow lurking by the doorway, panic emerging anew. A face, once familiar, now twisted in horror as the gun fell from his shaking hands. Father Brown's stomach clenched, grasping the resolve of mercy tempered by agony as the air thickened with fate. In that instant, it became clear. Understanding might mean confronting something more shattering than death itself. With one last, petrifying crash of lightning, all eyes turned, the precarious balance teetering dangerously towards the cliff of understanding or the abyss of despair. Inside, emotions peaked at a fevered pitch, the spectral weight of unresolved conflict hanging atop their every word. What price must we pay, he breathed, the flickering shadows around them weaving a dark tapestry of love lost and lives forever altered. Before the answers could seep through the storm's wrath, a sudden, deafening explosion shattered the fragile remnants between light and darkness, a gunshot ringing from the heart of despair. The question who had fired still echoing ominously within the halls, leaving all broken in its wake.